Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the PARTNER PLC investor presentation for the full year results for the year ended 31st of January 2021. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and you'll be notified once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Mark Briffa, CEO, and Joanne Estelle, CFO of PARTNER PLC. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yep, good morning everybody, and thank you for attending. Welcome to the PARTNER results for 2021, full year results, which ended 31 January. Just like to point out, this is our 60th year in aviation, and what a great time to announce such fantastic results. So I'm going to turn to the presentation and go to the financials at a glance. And here, as you can see, we've got all the arrows going in the right direction, all extremely positive. And I'm just going to pull out one or two of these that I think are real key highlights. So the underlying profit before tax up 176%, which is just a phenomenal achievement. It is a record year for the company. Just want to emphasise that. Our net cash of 9.9 million. We've got great product and jet card sales, which is up 6.6%. Cash held separately of 17.8 million, and we've reinstated the dividend. I know we say here up 33.3%. A little bit of disingenuity because we're quite conscious of the fact that last year we didn't pay a dividend. But as you can see, phenomenal set of results. Moving on to bringing it more to life and the strategy in action. I'm going to pull out one or two things here for you, really. Despite the pandemic, we were still able to hire 10 new people throughout the organisation, and most of those were at the front end with revenue generating. We've had over 200 cross-selling transactions throughout the pandemic, either across products in charter and or across between safety and security and charter at the same time. Our US business now contributes 39.6% of our gross profit. Worth pointing out to you that we've acquired one business asset in the year, which is CHS. And this business itself actually is involved with test bags at airports, along with remote monitoring at airports as well at the same time. And last but not least, we were able to increase our jet card numbers by 9.4%. Moving on to the next slide, which is all around, again, just putting it all into perspective on the timelines between 20 and 21. I'm going to put out some key points here as well for you, really, but it really does truly bring it to life, a strategy in action. Back in April, we were incredibly busy with freight, with the PPE transactions across the world, bringing PPE out of Asia into the USA, as well as into Europe, and as well as into the UK. I want to make a point as well where we raised 7.5 million of cash through new ordinary share placing. And we did this at the time where we really still didn't know, how long this pandemic would last for. There was still plenty of uncertainty, but also we were well aware of some really big contracts that are out there that we were looking to win and fulfill throughout the back end of the year. And one of those was the US White House campaign work. And sadly, through the pandemic, which impacted that piece of work, where people were unable to travel, that didn't actually materialise, which was a really sad thing in some ways, but clearly understood why. Another one I want to point out to you here is in September with Bain Simmons, who've been heavily involved with supporting the electric aircraft project and the CHS acquisition back in the end of October and November. And last but not least, our donation of over 100,000 meals, which we donated to local charities at food banks. To contribute our piece to making people have something to eat during the festive season. Then if I actually turn to the next slide, which actually brings the strategy to life in numbers, whilst we were aware that the financial year 21 was dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic, what I'm going to say here is that, look, moving at the highlights of the financials, group charter was up 21%. Freight was up 271%, whilst private jets was down 20%, primarily driven by the restrictions in the UK and Europe. But let's not lose sight of the fact that the US still continued on with the leisure market on private jets. And safety and security also was up 26%, but I'm going to carry out and say to you on that particular point there, that's the first full year of our Redline acquisition. Moving on to, whilst the results are incredibly strong, I want to point out to you that the US today now contributes 39.6% of our total group profits. So this is really all about how the strategy that we set out 4 years ago to grow this business through new hires, different leadership, new strategy is significantly playing through to our group charter business. And onto the strategic progress, the organic growth through hiring people, new geographies, which includes Asia this year, the M&A activity, Redline last year, CHS this year, is absolutely playing through in creating that diversity into what we've got as a business today as the Air Partner Group. The next 3 slides really bring to life, what does this all really mean? How's it really worked in the business throughout the year? And it's all about really high-level case studies. And the first one is our air evacuation business, of where we have large corporates taking out evacuation plans, and throughout this pandemic, they've been using our charter business to get their workers home or to get their employees home. And that's played out incredibly well in allowing the customer a one-stop shop solution, making one single point of contact. Really important at these hours of needs when people need to make quick decisions and get these people home, has worked incredibly well for us. The second one is the Japanese cruise liner, and this one here is all about security working closely with Group Charter. Whilst Group Charter working with the FCO, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, where we had to arrange the charter, what we rapidly realised that the logistics down route on the ground weren't necessarily in place that were required to carry out the necessary security checks to get these people off the ship and to move them home. So we mobilised Redline at this time to take the security people down there to do the screening, as well as we had to ship security equipment in the hold of a charter airplane. And this all played out extremely well, served the customer extremely well, got their customers home very quickly and got them home safely at the same time. And this is what I would define as the company working as one in this particular case study. And the last one is all around working with suppliers. So on this particular example here, worked closely with one of our key suppliers in America, JetEdge, creating their SOPs, which is the safety operating procedures around the security side of COVID-19. And Redline were involved in helping them write these procedures and to get them in place to satisfy their customers. And again, this is a great example of how we can work with suppliers, working with one of our product offering and provide that service at very, very short notice. And again, it served us well and served our suppliers well at the same time. Now I'll move on to the next slide, which is more about numbers and the divisional overview. Firstly, let's turn to the pie chart. And in this particular chart here, it really tells an interesting story. Whilst you've got Group Charter still 39.7% of our business, what you can see here is how the freight business has been a significant contributor to Group Charter, where it's 26.6% now is where we have been with freight. And that's been driven by PPE, as well as Go Now charters such as the automotive sector, moving parts out of Asia into Europe and into the USA. Private jets have shrunk, but we know the reasons why. Impacted by the pandemic in the UK and Europe, nonetheless recovery in the US, but not recovering enough in that US business to sort of bridge that gap of what we got in the UK and Europe. And last but not least, you can see the pie chart in safety and security now starting to grow. Despite the pandemic, you've got growth there at 13%. And I'd like to think you'll see more growth as we go through the year. And as airports start to open up, as governments start to reduce those restrictions, we're going to start to see more growth in this particular area. I will then break that down per division. I look at Group Charter, up 21%, driven by government, sports, cruise line evacuations, as well as corporate shuttles. And on the private jet side, whilst we say it's down 20%, we keep repeating and we keep reiterating, but the US business in private jets is still strong and is still growing. And on the freight side, phenomenal achievement, up 271%, driven by PPE, automotive parts, and designer clothing moving out of Asia into parts of the world which we've not seen before. And whilst I reiterate, safety and security has grown by 26%, let's not kid ourselves and be clear here around what's been impacted by safety and security. The discretionary spend in safety has impacted that side of the business, albeit we're starting to see some green shoots. And on the security side, as airports have closed, footfall has fallen, airport security training needs have pared themselves back. Nonetheless, green shoots are starting to materialise as these airports start to open again and start to mobilise, and short notice of work is rapidly coming through. I'm now going to hand over to Joanne Estelle to take you through our financials in more detail.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to take you through the financial highlights, picking out the key areas. So those of you who are familiar with our partner will know that our key measure is gross profit. That's because some of our revenues, depending on whether we act as an agent or a principal, are affected. So the key measure that we look at is gross profit. So you can see that that was up 31% on the prior year. If we look at the administrative admin costs, it looks like on the face of it that they have increased by 3.4 million, but that's driven by a number of factors. One is the higher commissions that we paid, given that the gross profit was significantly higher. We also had the full year impact of the Redline acquisition in our numbers as well. These items were offset by some government support that we took, furlough money. That was 1.3 million, and also some reorganisation savings that we made as well. So gross profit less the admin expenses, we delivered underlying operating profit of 12 million, which was up on the prior year by 150%. And after exceptional items, underlying profit, we delivered 11.6 million. And then after exceptional items, that converted to statutory profit of 8.4 million. The exceptional items were made up of two elements. One was the 2.4 million of amortized intangible assets, and the other one was our reorganisation costs that we incurred in the year. The reorganisation activities that we did were people related, but also we looked at the portfolio of properties that we've got, and we downscaled there where appropriate. We also made the conscious decision to exit the UK travel agency business, which was relatively low margin and considered non-core. So after those effects, underlying basic EPS 14.2 pence, and the final dividend for the year 1.6 pence, giving the total dividend for the year of 2.4 pence. As Mark said earlier, that was up by 33%, albeit last year in FY20, we withdrew the final dividend due to the pandemic. On the next slide, I'll take you through the regional split. So on the regional split, if we concentrate on the graphs on the left-hand side, the UK looks like it's strongly performed, but that's actually supported by the Redline acquisition. If you adjust for that impact, the UK region was broadly flat year on year. And that's because that's where most of the revenues from the safety and security part of the business come from. And that had a particular difficult trading period due to the pandemic. Also, PJ was affected in the UK. And also we had some tour operations that usually comes out of the UK, which was also affected. If you look at Europe, that was really hard hit by the pandemic. So that's the area for us where we do private jets and tour operations. Encouragingly, the rest of the world has increased year on year. The rest of the world was actually key to what the US did. They supported a lot of the freight logistic activity that was going on. But obviously the star performer that you can see from this graph is the strong performance from the US, which was up by 128%. And that was because of all the product ranges that we do there. So group charter for the reasons Mark said, also the freight logistics, and private jets had a very strong second half to the year and remained fairly buoyant relative to the rest of the estate. If we look at the right-hand side, we can see the contribution each of those regions gives to the overall gross profit of the group. So we're encouraged by the fact that over 55% of our gross profit now comes outside of the UK. And obviously the US has been the star performer, and you can see that contribution has increased significantly. We would expect the US to contribute significantly to overall gross profits for this year that we're in. And we are really encouraged by the growth that we're seeing there. We expect Europe to come back, albeit it may be slower. We're dependent on restrictions, border restrictions being let open, and the successful rollout of the vaccine obviously will have an impact there. So pulling this all together now on the cash slide, I'll take you through that in detail. It's quite a busy slide, but I'll pick out the key elements. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we started the year with 21.4 million of cash. Now that consists of 4.6 million of cash in the bank and also 16.7 million of Jet Card cash. If you go to the far right, you can see that we've now got cash in the bank of 9.9 million and Jet Card cash of 17.8 million. As a reminder to those who are new to our partner, we keep the Jet Card cash in separate segregated bank accounts. We don't use that for our working capital means. That is well protected. So the big movements in the year, we did a fundraise in June, so that net gave us 7 million. We used that to pay down the debt that we took on when we acquired Redline. We also paid tax on the strong performance. That's a big number for us in the year, the 4.6 million of tax that we have there. And we also had a positive working capital swing. Now that's worthy just to pause and comment on. What happened there is that the type of mix of business that we did during the pandemic didn't really require credit from our customers. So we were getting paid up front. So we had the unwinding of the balance sheet there. What we do expect going forward is we will have to invest in working capital as the safety and security comes back online, also tour operations and some of the government contract work that we do. They do enjoy credit from us, as do some other of our corporate customers on the meeting and events. So overall, cash is very strong for us. As I say, ending the year at 9.9 million. We do have access to a 13 million committed RCF facility and 1.5 million of an overdraft facility also. So we're in a really good, strong position. I'll pass you back to Mark. Mark, you're on mute.
Mark, hi, sorry, just on mute. One sec. There you go.
Thanks, Joanne. So this slide here positions our partner for the future. I'm going to pull out some 3 key points here rather than go through every single one. The strategic progress is one of the ones I'm going to pull out. The continuation of hiring key people to help us grow our business is absolute key. And you know that we're finding positive at the moment. We've got a lot of people that are keen to join the organisation and the success of it at the same time. The importance to grow our Asian presence out, albeit we're going to take some very, very small steps in this area here just to make sure we understand the market and the backdrop very well. The continuation of cross-selling and the collaboration between the group, between safety, security and charter will carry on. We've seen the success in this year of how well that's worked through the cross-selling opportunities. The need for us also to focus on growth, US, plenty of growth opportunities there today. To put it into perspective, we've got really less than 1% of the private jet aviation business. It just goes to show how much scope there is there to grow. The Asian expansion is important for us, which I've mentioned before, and the need to continue to grow out our safety and security side. Worth pointing out to you, we've only owned Redline since 2019 in December. Then we went into a pandemic in February. We're really truly excited about this business and the opportunity that it presents. We've barely tipped the iceberg here. The last one for me is the shareholder returns, the importance of smoothing out the charter earnings. We recognise the lumpiness in charter. We believe we're on that trajectory now to really start making some inroads as we go through the next 2 to 3 years. The importance was also for us to reinstate the dividend and to be clear with the market about our dividend policy going forwards, which we believe we've been as well at the same time. And the other thing I want to point out to you is the improvement of the balance sheet. Today, as I sit here as a CEO, it's one of the strongest balance sheets that I've seen since I've been the CEO in the organisation, which has really been for the past 10 years. Now I want to move on to the ESG slide. Now for me here, what this shows, the slides, what's in these slides really say it all. I'm going to put a little bit of colour on. Let's start with the environment piece. And for me here, we've got 4 pillars the company now has of commitments. We've been working closely with Delta Simmons to make sure we get these commitments right and we can actually make them live in the organisation. We're also working closely with our customers in offsetting their carbon footprint, again, working with climate care at the same time. And we're also, at the moment, developing our charitable partnerships, which we'll talk more about when we come to the half year and disclose more on the progress of the environment side at the half year and the year end. If I move on to the social piece here, a couple of things I want to point out. One is the donations we made at Christmas to the food banks, where we have offices in the UK, in Europe and the USA at the same time. Also, not escaped our minds, the Mental Health Awareness Week. We've got a lot of good activity going this week, and it's absolutely fundamentally critical that we're looking after our people and making sure we do the right things that helps them through these really challenging times on this pandemic. Really important for us. Onto the governance side, the engagement with the workforce has continued on, CEO videos every week, town halls every month, the opportunity to speak to the board, loads of opportunities of channels of communication now in the organisation where people can talk to various people at various levels. It's making a real difference to the business in people really truly understanding what we're trying to do and the direction of travel. And as I move on to the last slide, the current trading and outlook, we've had a good start to the year. Q1 has met and beaten management expectations. We see Q2 following the similar footsteps as Q1. I'm going to carry out all of that and say to you, but not at the same levels as last year. The freight activities we're seeing in the UK, the US and Europe has carried on, heavily involved with delivering test kits and vaccine raw material, as well as still involved with the automotive sector as well. The US charter business, where it left last year, has continued into this year, and we're seeing the momentum carrying on, particularly in the private jet side and particularly in the freight side. Our jet card sales has continued to be fairly strong, and we see good momentum in this area at the same time. If I look at safety and security, as airports are opening up, as airlines need to mobilise, as governments start to release these restrictions, they're becoming extremely busy. And on the safety side, we've been able to transition some of the training products into virtual training, which is really starting to help these airlines as they start to mobilise. I believe, last but not least, that the group is well positioned with its diverse strategy as the governments release restrictions, as we start to see a degree of normality, that we are well placed to really gain some interesting positive traction as we move forwards.
That's fantastic. Mark, Joanne, thank you so much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Mark and Joanne take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that recording this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Mark, Joanne, we've had several questions submitted by investors during the presentation itself. Perhaps if I could just hand back to you, and if I may just ask you to read out the question and your response where appropriate to do so, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. So first question from Andy M. Can you give me an understanding of the competitive landscape and what do you think is your real difference? So firstly, the competitive landscape is very, very fragmented. If I look at ourselves and compare ourselves to the peer group, there isn't really anybody that is delivering what we're delivering, whether it's safety, security and charter at the same time. When I say fragmented, what you've got here is you've got various competitors delivering some of what we deliver, but not all. And so what I'd say there is that from a perspective of competitive landscape, we are unique in where we currently are. What is our real difference? For me, our real difference here is we offer a very personalised service. We are very, very into the detail in making sure what we deliver, we actually have that capability of making it an exceptional service that makes the person or the customer come back and want to book again. The next question is from Simon C. Great progress here. What is your view on paying dividends versus M&A? Well, I think I've answered the dividend piece throughout the slides. We've got a new policy, which we disclosed at the half year. I believe that's very clear now and very achievable. On the M&A piece, look, there are opportunities that are out there, as we all know. We're all well aware of. The market is in a very interesting place. We continue to look at opportunities on M&A as and when they present themselves. But I think we've made a good commitment to the dividend, and we will continue to review M&A.
Mark, I'll just add, just for clarity for those on the call, that we are targeting 3 to 3.5 times earnings. That's after adding back non-cash related exceptional items.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. The next question is from Chris C. What revenue did Redline have pre-acquisition?
Yes, so pre-ac, it was at 6.5 million.
Thanks, Joanne. The next one is from Peter D. Was the acquisition of CHS R&S? I can't find an announcement for it.
Yeah, that was in February, Peter. We did that as part of the trading update that we did.
Thank you, Joanne. The next question is, are you looking for acquisitions? If so, what would be a priority? Again, I come back to the same point I made earlier on. We are looking at acquisitions. We look at everything that comes through our desk. We evaluate, we review, and then we feel there's one that meets our criteria, which is capability and expands our product range, we will consider. The next question is from Stephen S. What impact is Brexit having to the operation? Any obstacles in ability for short notice charters within the EU? Well, firstly, I'm going to say here, Brexit itself brings me back to operations of where we are now to where we were about 10 years ago, where I would define it as fifth freedom traffic rights for non-registered aircraft coming out the destination of where you start your charter. At the moment, no major impact on the private jet side. There's a little bit more complexity about how you can't use the same airplane originated from the UK if you want to go to intra-Europe. But we are finding ways around that, which are working out fine for our customers. On the group charter side, it's been really clear so far. There's no complications there, and it's not really having a significant impact. If I go on to Bain Simmons, worth putting out here is, safety been impacted throughout the pandemic on discretionary spend. But here in this particular case, still able to offer training courses in the UK and consultancy in the UK and outside of Europe. However, intra-Europe, we are impacted by what we can offer due to our non-Brexit situation. And so we're looking at other ways of how we could do that, which will include setting up an entity in one of our European offices to be able to deliver those courses. Anthony M, a very impressive set of results, well done. I assume these have been achieved when some of your markets like conference, sports, inclusive tour cruise have been devastated. Do you see these markets recovering, and when? Firstly, Anthony, thank you ever so much for the compliments. You're absolutely right. The conference market is impacted. I don't see the recovery until at least next year. And so is the inclusive tour business, along with the cruise business. However, the sports business has remained strong, more Premier League teams using charter aircraft rather than using trains. And so the recovery is going to take at least another year, but it's all going to be subject to government releasing the restrictions and the confidence around consumers wishing to travel, as well as corporates needing to travel as well at the same time.
That's fantastic. I think you've pretty much covered off everything that we've had through there. And if any further questions do come through, of course, the company will review all questions submitted today and we'll publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so. Mark, Joanne, thank you very much again for the presentation. And Mark, perhaps I could just ask you for a few final words to wrap up before we redirect investors to give you some feedback.
Yeah, thank you very much. So lastly, thanks for taking the time to listen to myself and Joanne this morning. Thanks for taking the time for interest in the company. It's a fantastic business. We've got some exciting times ahead. And thanks again for spending time with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joanne. Can I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you'd be so kind, just to take a couple of seconds just to do so, it would be greatly appreciated by the company. We would like to say on behalf of PARTNER PLC, thank you very much for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you very much and good afternoon.